mentioned, usually we wait till the end of the meeting for me to make this announcement. I'm going to start before the meeting. Our very own Antoine Malloy has left the Temptations, and he's now with Melvin and the Blue Notes. They were looking for somebody ever since Teddy Pendergrass. And he is now appearing with Melvin and the Blue Notes, and he will be at the Holiday Inn in the Blue Room for the 6 o'clock show. And the late show will be in the Gold Room.
There's tipping waiters.
Antoine.
Oh,
Thanks, buddy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would you please rise and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you could remain standing, please, and just for a moment of silence for the tragedies that happened last weekend in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, keeping in mind the victims, their families, and also keeping in mind our first responders. Thank you. Okay, welcome everybody. My name is John Bruno. It's my second shot here at running this this show. So if I go off a little bit here, Sherry will give me an elbow, I'm sure. But first item of business here will be the action items on approved draft minutes for May 9, 2019 meeting. Did everybody have a chance to look over all the minutes from the last meeting?
move to approve.
Move to approve. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's have it. Moving on. An approved financial report for August 8th, 2019. And I will turn that over to Beth.
Good morning. Fiscal
Good morning.
report for the fourth quarter of the 18-19 state fiscal year is on pages 7 through 13 of your packet. Under receipts, the balance carried forward from the previous fiscal year was $1,762,587.83. The fees collected through the fourth quarter were $1,784,083.33. Total funds available as of June 30, 2019 were $3,546,671.16. Under expenditures and commitments, total cumulative expenditures as of June 30, 2019 were $1,754,646.66. Total cumulative expenditures and commitments as of June 30, 2019 were $3,577,914.25. That includes $789,248.15 in administrative expenditures and commitments. The breakdown of these costs is on page 10. Total uncommitted funds as of June 30, 2019 is negative $31,243.19. I think I got the page number wrong. Page 9 is the page number for administrative breakdown.
The one thing I want to point out is, if you look, this is that time of year where we have overlapping contracts. We issued some new contracts for next year. We're still in the process of closing out old contracts from the previous year. So the next fiscal report, you'll see that rectified, old contracts closed out, and any money that wasn't expended comes back to the fund. So.
And that's a good note for the admin commitments too, because POs were, for the next year, were done before June 30th, so they show up on here too.
So I think you'll see an uptick in the financial situation at the next report.
That's everything. Discussion, gentlemen? Any discussion, comments?
Well, I think there has to be a discussion on this particular item. I'm not sure what the discussion is going to lead to. I think the question that I would have is, as we look at the balance sheets for the organization, is there a period in which we are looking at in which we are going to fall woefully short of our revenue stream to the point where we're going to be negative as an organization? That's my question. It's hard for me to interpolate this on this particular program. So, if there's any way you could maybe help identify that for us, where would we look in here? A lot of the reports have come out. I haven't had a chance to look at. Obviously, this is a great. By the way, I don't know who put it together.
We'll be reviewing that here a little later.
So you're gonna, that'll be presented.
Okay, but anyway, my question is more general than that. I guess as we look at finances, it's easy to approve it and move forward. As we move forward, what does that do to this organization if we don't do all the right things at this point? I guess that's my question.
I think John and Sherry would speak better to all the efforts that have been made to cut.
Right, and so all the actions the board took last year, the reduction in training, et cetera, and we were projecting roughly $750,000 savings. And that's where the next report, you're gonna see that. You're gonna see the impact because the newer contracts for training have that reduced budget on all these schools. So you're gonna see, and when we were looking at, we got the revised budgets for 2019, what we projected last year, we're pretty close to being on target.
Okay.
So we're gonna see that, and we know revenues stay about 1.5 historically, and I was projecting just under 1.4 for expenditures during this transition period because we're doing the online stuff, we gotta get that up and running. And I think after that, as long as we can kind of control our basic costs, if we're still running classroom basic and if we still have a Con Ed, a skills day like we've talked about where it's just an 8-hour or whatever, I think our expenditures over the years will stay within revenues, but just like anything, costs will start to creep up because we'll start putting more things online, that vendor, those costs, just the way things work. So I think we still need a surcharge. I mean, this is a temporary, we're stop the bleeding, but it doesn't mean the patient is routed. So.
Well, we've talked about this, John, in the past, and what we did was historic, I think, for this board. And it's General and I were talking, it's pretty much a Band-Aid because we have got to get, somebody has to do something. I mean, we make recommendations and, where they go into discussion groups or they go into the closet. We're going to see better numbers from what you're saying, but that's not a long-term objective for us
Right.
at all.
Right. We're, as you said, this is a short-term fix. It's not a long-term fix. And
Right.
the long-term fix is that surcharge increase. And I know,
It's like one of the tourniquets that UPMC gave us, and we'll put it on.
Stop the bleed, yeah.
At some point, that's take it off. We're going to have an amputation.
Right.
If finances don't improve by the way of legislation or.
Right. So.
Has the commission or anybody gotten feedback from the General Assembly? Has anybody from Judiciary actually responded back or given any indication that they're listening to anything that's going on, or are they operating with blinders on up there? And
No, I know there have been some more phone calls to this agency from legislators, because I also know the one association has been doing a lot to beat the brush, with legislators and saying, hey, this needs to get fixed. Of course, that article I forwarded to you, I think last week from the Reading Eagle, that generated some conversation from legislators calling here. So I think it's starting to And this next presentation we're going to have by Rob Orth, this document we're going to put out there on the webpage, it's going to generate a lot of discussion, I think. It's going to be a good tool for constables to take to their legislators and go. Take a look at this.
That article in the Reading Eagle that you talked about, so I read that article, then I went into the comments. I'm always curious to see what the population out there is saying. And what was the majority of the comments? Why these guys not paying for their own training? That's out there. And so that's the other part of this equation. Is that what the judiciary is looking for us to do, is just go ahead and make this a pay-to-play thing?
Well, and of course, we've talked, and it's in today as an action item about the basic training. So we're going to discuss that, and it's up for you to take action on that. And then the next issue, and I think we kind of got solved. The big one was talking about, guys, if you work for the court, you come to training. If you don't, you don't. And there was some kind of administrative, how would we do that? And I think we've kind of maybe come up with some ideas, but I'm not prepared. I mean, literally just talking in this last week, I don't have the right information to present to you, but I think we can do that at the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to just, I think we need to probably look at that very, very specifically what you're recommending, because I was in Reading, just came back from Reading for a 5-day conference with the County Commissioners Association. I have to admit, very seldom does any of this discussion come up to this. There seems to be a hands-off policy on constables for whatever reason. Don't want to talk about it. They only talk about it when there is a consideration of changing the constable program and re-latching it into the sheriff's department, which means there is an additional burden of cost, significant burden of cost, that will be placed upon the shoulders of counties through this process. I don't know that that connection has been linked out. I saw in here 2 comments that really stick out to me. And I just got it this morning, but when you read them, and I think this is the uphill battle we face in trying to get a surcharge to fix the problem. Whatever that surcharge we get to fix the problem, I don't know that's going to work. When you have a representative who says this, many committee members feel the constable system should be phased out through attrition and their duties assumed by county sheriff's departments. That's a pretty strong statement. On the next page, you have a former president of the County Commissioners Association, Christian Leinbach, who was saying, wow, if you do that though, we can't afford to bring 3 or 4 deputy sheriffs on to offset that burden that's laid back on the county. So before anything is done, we may have to make a pitch as an organization here to the county commissioners to let them know this is where we're heading if we don't get some help. They need to be really, I think, a linchpin to the legislature to a great extent, because we will end up paying the bills.
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm not concerned about that ever happening. First of all, most of the sheriffs that I've talked to, I deal with the deputy sheriff training program. Sheriffs don't want it. They don't want to deal with the landlord-tenant stuff. They don't want to deal. They got enough on their plate as is. And as you express, county commissioners, that's good. And most counties, it's going to take more than 2 or 3 deputies to take over that work.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing is, that same representative has been saying this, and he has never introduced a bill. It's now going on almost 5 years. Our old executive director and he and I met with him and some other people, and he proposed this idea. Then the president said, yeah, great idea, but in reality it's not going to happen. The sheriff has enough to do. So I think if that was going to happen, it would have happened. I don't think anybody supports that for various reasons.
Well, I'm glad to say that I don't have a feel for that, frankly. My feel is, in my county, just hearing what our judges say, they favor sheriffs.
Well, and I guess
more than county favors sheriffs. There's a few other counties that favor sheriffs. Okay, but we need to make a pitch on the constable side to say, look, maybe that's not where we need to go. I'm not sure we've done that. And I'm just making recommendations here. I'm not, I'm just offering a comment here today because I think it has to come out someplace, and it's not coming out.
I don't disagree with you, Commissioner. As we said, that this board, we can't go out, thumping for legislation. The other thing too is, if there was a more economic, efficient way to serve the minor judiciary other than constables, it would have happened by now. It would have already occurred. And when it really comes down to, that's what it comes down to is the money. Because if John doesn't work today, nobody pays him.
I know.
Versus, and one of the things, on the deputy sheriff's side, that fund, it's tanking because they got in their legislation, we reimburse the county for training. That's a lot of money that should just stay there for training. But we reimburse the county for the deputy's salary, travel, and we pay for the training. So it costs nothing to train that deputy. And while he's in class, he's collecting salary. He's not serving papers. These guys, when they sit in class, they're not earning money. So,
John, if I can add this, and I think every stakeholder here should be aware when we talk about the sheriffs taking over, which I agree with John. I don't believe that's ever going to happen. But I can tell you, my home county, as you know, is Allegheny County. Right next door is Westmoreland County, and I've been sitting out there for a few years now, different assignments. And as you recall, I guess it was about a decade ago, when the famous husband and wife team from Jeanette were indicted for triple billing, and at that point, the then president judge issued a court order that constables would not work in criminal court in Westmoreland County, in the magistrate's courts. Well, that got shifted to the sheriffs, and the county commissioners in Allegheny County quickly added a $75 surcharge, and you're aware of that. The problem is that they didn't add any extra sheriffs. They're not really serving. Those warrants get served when somebody gets arrested, and they check to see if there's a warrant. That's when that happens. So as of Monday, I believe this to be an actual number, there are 36,000 unserved magistrates warrants in Westmoreland County, and that number is growing by day and week and month. So who knows where they'll be next year, but in that case, the sheriff's department is not assuming the role. I don't know how you could ever, when you jump next door to Allegheny County, Antoine, you'll agree with me, they could never handle the volume that is generated in Allegheny County. Unless they'd have to hire, what do you think, Antoine? 30 or 40 deputy sheriffs, and just assign them to the magistrate's courts.
At least.
I mean, that Pittsburgh Municipal Court, that's a nightmare. They must have 100,000 unserved warrants down there, and constables are serving those too.
That's right.
Well, it's not a workable solution, is what you're saying, but
It's not.
in
I don't believe it is.
I don't believe it is either. But talking to the general's point, perhaps what we need to do in a future session with the entire PCCD board is to put this to rest once and for all.
Well, we've tried to do that. So I
By
agree with you.
by even perhaps entertaining the sheriffs to come in and tell the PCCD board that this would never happen, it could never happen, and put together some sort of cost analysis. Perhaps you can do that through, I don't know, the County Commissioners Association. So if they hear it from the horse's mouth instead of hearing it from us, they hear from the sheriffs directly. That, look, this is what we would need. Maybe that would shut this down.
John, what are the two counties that share a common police court, and they only have I don't know if they have
Forest
four
and Elk.
courts.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
or, yeah.
Forced to know.
I mean, it may be able to work there
Yeah,
with an additional one or two
right,
deputies, because they don't generate anything there.
right.
But when you start going into populated areas, and I'm going to include your Indiana County's big enough that how the hell could the sheriff's department handle the
Well,
magistrates courts in Indiana County?
you'd have to the hiring of the sheriffs, the entire benefit package that will come along with. It's just not a workable
No, it's not.
solution, but nonetheless, it's still every now and then it keeps being thrown out. So what I'm saying, perhaps in the near future with this board, is we need to get someone in from the Sheriff's Association or county commissioners, present it to the board and say, listen, okay, and that could be a a segue to our our play, and then so you introduce that, shut that down, and then say, here's our workable solution. So
A workable solution is for that crew down the street to go in and pass legislation to raise the fee bills.
correct.
That's the workable solution. It's a user fee. It's not going to come out of taxpayers'
Right.
pockets.
And I do believe that bill is going to be reintroduced. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
That bill is going to be reintroduced, and I'm not quite sure who the new representative who's going to reintroduce that bill is.
Well, I was going to say, Mr. Chair, if we can kind of move past the fiscal report, because all those things we're talking about, the next presentation,
Correct.
I think is going
All
to
right.
be very well.
Thank you. That's why you're here to beat me up. I have a motion to accept the fiscal report as presented.
I'll make that. No problem with that.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. No nays. Okay. Let us move on here.
So
Go ahead,
you
John.
should have a handout. Mr. Rob Worth will do the presentation here. We collected a bunch of data from AOPC, and Rob's a statistical researcher here at PCCD, and he crunched through the numbers to.
Tracy has some extra copies for the audience members then too.
John, I'm just curious, how did the collection of that data go? Was it fairly smooth or?
Yeah, we were able to get actually more data out of AOPC than we initially thought.
Oh, good.
And then once Rob looked at it, he was able to extrapolate.
Yeah.
He was able to look at it a lot better and
Good.
come up with some of this. So. Rob, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Rob Worth with IUP and PCCD. I'm on staff here to evaluate PCCD's programs, funding streams, things of that nature. So today we'll be talking about constables relative to training, court work, things of that nature. It's my understanding that this is the first time in about 25 years that you all are probably seeing this data. So really excited to be able to show you this and show it to you in a meaningful way that I think can really impact and inform some decision making for you. I do want to acknowledge my coworker Charles Gardside is here as well, and he was very instrumental in helping collect this data, bringing it together, helping do the mapping as well. The data came from AOPC. We got 2 separate extracts. And so what we're going to look at is a 3-year period. We're also going to look at a 1-year period. So on our 3-year period, we're going to look at dockets, court work activity between 2016 through 2018. On our 1-year period of 2016, we're going to look at new constables trained, certified if they're working for the courts. And we're also going to look at types of dockets, criminal versus civil, traffic, the other things. And then also service assessments on those dockets. So some very unique, meaningful information. I'm just going to walk my way through it. I'll try not to overburden you with a lot of data. I'll try to keep it high level. We can dig into this. If there's any questions, you can reach out to John or reach out to myself. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have. So the first one is, we looked at certified constables that were trained to work for the courts. We saw a 9.2% decrease there from 2016 through 2018. And when we start to, and I'll try to keep up with this here, when we start looking at, of those who were trained, how many actually showed up to work for the courts, right? In 2016, we had about a 55-44 split, right? 55%, 56% are working for the courts. The 2017 cohort, it's dropping, 52.6. 2018, we're at a 50-50 split, right? So you're instantly losing from those people trained to certified and working for the courts, right? About 50%. That's the key takeaway as of the latest data in 2018. The next chart here, we did a little bit of a longitudinal study to say, okay, let's stick with the folks in 2016 that were trained and certified and work for the courts, and let's follow them all the way throughout to 2018. Are they still working for the courts or not? And so you can see there's some attrition there, right? They go from 55, 56%. In the third year, they're down to about 44%. So within 3 years of those people coming in, trained, certified, working for the courts, only 44% of everyone is remaining, still working for the courts. I will call your attention to something that's a little bit more alarming to me, is if you look, the 2016 cohort drops to 2017 there, sort of in the very first year. It does take 2 years to get there, right? 1 year, 2 years. The 2018 cohort is there immediately at the 50% mark, right? So you've basically lost an entire year there where it goes right to 50-50, whereas in 2016 it was taking 2 years, 16 and 17 to get there. So it does show a general trend, and I don't know what the 2019 data is. We definitely will dig into that and see if that continues, but the general trend based on that is it is decreasing. If we switch over here to newly certified constables, we had 506 come in 2016. That was sort of the big training year based on election and when these folks sort of took their term of office, their oath of office started. It's my understanding the next one rolls around in 2022. Is that correct?
Correct.
Of those people who came in to be trained, it was about 70% passed. 30% dropped off. 30% did not pass training. They were not certified. So of the 506 that were trained, you had 353 that were then certified. We looked in all 3 years, 2016, 2017, 2018, did they show up? Did that unique constable show up to perform any court work? Not a single one did.
So one thing I want to jump in here. So that number of 153, if did not pass, those are people, they may have taken training, we paid for it, and they never got their insurance, never got the. So there's a whole permutation. The guy dropped out of training, they failed, they went through training, we might have paid for it, but they didn't get their insurance. So
I will say
there's a whole host of reasons.
One more thing too, not to make the situation more dire, but it is important to shed a light on it. We did an econometric analysis back in March, April. Mr. Chairman, you were there for that. And what we did is we looked at the revenue that was coming into the fund based on the number of dockets that the constables would get, right? Assuming the $5 surcharge. What we found is of those folks, there was like 15% of people who weren't even getting enough money coming into the fund that it would offset or defray the cost of training invested in them. So if you take that down on the 50%, you're back down to 35% that aren't even paying the offset cost of the training. Just something to keep in mind, because this is stuff that has never been looked at in 25 years. It's very important to get that out there.
So the court's investment in that constable is certainly not paying off.
Correct.
It's not coming back.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, just a question.
Sure.
This is really good statistical information.
Thank you.
Very, very well done.
Thank you.
Do you convert the statistical percentages into financial dollars so that we actually know what impact these numbers have over the 3-year period? And what are we actually paying out as an organization, and what are we receiving back? Because this is startling.
Yeah, and I think we have done a little bit of that, but it was very sort of tentative. It was like, hey, we got an extract, and here's what we can do. I think after this meeting, John will probably go back. We'll probably get a new update from AOPC to see what was done. But if I can switch over here, and if you just assume a $5 surcharge, right, for dockets, you can apply that, right, the $5 surcharge here to all of these dockets, and you can sort of figure out what your investment is versus what's coming in. It's my understanding that what's coming in can take years to hit your books, right? So there's a lag time there too. Real quick, I want to keep moving forward though, just so we can have a good, productive conversation, because there's a lot more good data here. So we then switched and we looked at, okay, where is the court work taking place by county? This is the first time that I think anybody has ever seen this. And what we've done is, if you don't have it, you'll get one. But there's an insert here where it actually shows the number of unique constables working in that county over the 3-year period and how many dockets they got, and then the percentage of each. Okay, and I'll draw your attention to that real quick. There were 857 unique constables in that 3-year period working. Even though 2,200 or so were trained, they came in multiple years and they were working multiple years. So it was 857 at any one time in that 3-year period were around the state working for the courts. Important to understand that, because down here we have a total statewide of 857. Okay. And so let's just take as an example Allegheny County, because Allegheny County is the one that moves the needle. They have the most unique constables working for them, 242. That's nearly 3 out of every 10 constables at one point working in that county. Okay? They're bringing in 13% of all dockets in that 3-year period. Okay? So basically double the percentage of people working versus what's coming in. So it might speak a little bit to some market saturation, where you have a lot of people trying to get in there and work. What we've seen from the previous analysis, the econometric analysis, is there's a good portion, a good cohort of people who do a ton of great work. And then there's some other folks, actually the vast majority, that are getting, a few dockets, maybe a few dozen, but it's certainly like a percentage of people that are performing a vast amount of the work. And you'll see more of that. I'll call your attention to Westmoreland, because it was brought up, and I think this sort of validates what we heard, which is, Westmoreland has 10% of all constables working in it, but look at how low the dockets are that came in, less than 0.5%. And that might speak to what was said about those outstanding warrants being there, because no one's there to get them, right? Some other things to call your attention to, Center County, if I can find it. Center County, 133, almost 16% of all constables working there, getting, just over 0.5%. Again, a lot of people working there. Same thing with Columbia. 140, 16.3% working there, getting even less, a third of a percent. And you can take this and read it at your leisure. There's a ton of great information in there. I'll switch back over here to the main handout, the more colorful one. Dockets, 3-year dockets, each year decreased by 13.5%. So what we're seeing is a little bit over a 9% decrease in trained, certified constables working for the court, and then just in the similar vein, a 13.5% decrease in dockets coming in. So if those are going down, and we assume that that's what generates revenue for the fund, right? We can assume that less and less revenue through the surcharge would be coming in. What we did is we looked at the top 10 counties where unique constables were working. Okay, so we see Allegheny, Dauphin, Montgomery. That's all on the other sheet that I handed out here. 77% of unique constables are working in only 10 counties. Another 23% are working in 56 counties. So the bulk of the folks working, 3 out of every 4, are working in only 10 counties, right? 659 people. What's happening there, though, is 3 out of 4 people are only accounting for 4 out of every 10 dockets. 41% of all dockets. So again, it might speak to a little bit more of the market saturation going on. Top 10 counties by dockets here, 3-year dockets total, 65%. All dockets are coming from basically 10 counties, 65%. 35% they're split from the 56. And I'm sorry, I think I may have misspoke. This was 77% of constables working. If I did mess that up, I have twins. They're like almost 1 year old, so I'm just barely getting through every day. So I apologize. So constable work location, very cool analysis. This is home county, the constable's originating or elected county. versus are they getting the work out of county, right? And so here you see in the same county, the home county where they're elected, top 10 counties is Adams County. Just under 60% of all unique constables working there are coming from within the county. And the inverse of that would be out of county, right? So about 40% are coming from outside of the county to perform that work. Switching over here, you can see constables working out of county, very, very small counties there. So take that with a grain of salt. But I will call your attention to some other larger counties there. Blair, 117 constables working there. 95% of all the folks in Blair County working there are coming from out of the county. And so all of that information, I think we have that somewhere else. We'll get that to you, though. That way you can look down and see the breakdown there versus in-county versus out-of-county. But let me just say, so 89%, though, of all the dockets are originating in the constable's home county, right? 11% are coming from out of county. So most of the folks who are elected in that county, that's where the majority of the dockets are coming from. There's only a handful, about 10%, coming from out of county. Switching over, docket types and service assessments. What we see is, and this is just 1 year alone, it's 2016. We'll go back and try and get maybe the 3 years worth of data now that we know that we can get it. We see 1.7 million service assessments on the dockets for 2016. That's about an average service assessment of 3.2 for each docket. We then broke it down by docket types. It was kind of important for us to look at criminal dockets versus civil dockets and then lumping everything else into an other category. That would be your traffic, your non-traffic, your miscellaneous dockets, and your landlord-tenant would be the other big one there. There are some that are marked as secure in the data set. So we'll wrestle with those, but it wasn't a huge amount. What you see here is in terms of top 10 counties for criminal dockets. You can see it's Fulton County moving the needle at about 60%. Lycoming County, a much larger one, just over 20%. And there's some other big ones in there too. So Allegheny County, 7.8% are criminal dockets. Civil dockets, smaller counties, Westmoreland's there. Guess that makes sense, right? Based on what we heard with the criminal side, lend some credence to it. And then the other, the vast majority of all dockets fall into this other category, and they're mainly, the needle is moved by traffic, non-traffic, and landlord-tenant. So I have those breakdowns here. Statewide, 53.8% of all dockets were traffic, 17.8% non-traffic, and then 18% landlord-tenant. So that's where the majority of the work is happening. It's not on the criminal side. We could go back and maybe lump in landlord-tenant into the civil side, and you'll see a big increase there. It'll go up to about a quarter. 25% of all dockets will be on the civil side. And then what I have here is just some select county profiles here. So if we wanted to look at some of the larger ones, what's happening there. On the top, you can see the dockets, and it's broken down by that docket type. And then we have the service assessments, what's going on there. So in Allegheny County, we have a bit of variance here, but not much between criminal and civil. It's fairly close. Whereas we look over here to Delaware County, they got 11 dockets out of all the dockets that they do are criminal, so it's less than 1%. And then on the civil side, big increase there, 5.4%, but the vast majority, almost 95%, are the other things that we talked about: traffic, non-traffic, landlord, tenant. Erie and York County there are there as well. We have all of this data provided on the reverse side here, and I apologize, this mouse is moving slow. It's all here by each county. The interpretation is, if you were to look at it, taking Adams County, for example, there were 12 criminal dockets, 209 civil dockets, and then just over 3,000 other dockets. And then the respective percentages staying within that county total. So Adams County, about 94% of all their dockets were falling into the other. But there is some good movement here. So if you have a particular county that you're elected in or you tend to work in a lot, you can check this out. And it's just a fascinating analysis. switch back over. These are just the key takeaways on the back of this. I think everything that's here I've already covered. So I'll turn it over to you all if you want to ask some questions. I'd be happy to answer anything that I can. If you want to have a discussion, more than welcome to do that as well. So
It's a lot to absorb. It's very well done. I have to echo too what the commissioner had said about turning a lot of this data into some real numbers going forward. Go back to your chart there once. We'll just take Adams County since it's the first county up there. Yes, please. How many? Does it tell us how many constables are working or certified working for the courts?
yes, so that would be down here, and that was the unique. And then again, this is just 1 year, 2016, 857. If you add up all these percentages, they're going to add up way more than 100%. It's basically taking that number, York County, we have 66, and dividing it by the 857 to say the interpretation would be 7.7% of all unique constables at any one time in 2016 were working in that county. We also, I would be remiss if I didn't say this, but we did build tools that do track the constable. It also does put the analysis a little bit more granularly on MDJs, so we can go down below county level, and it can show where the constables are traveling to get those dockets based on what's coming in through the court system. So if we have five elected constables in York County that are going out to Allegheny County, we can identify that constable and find where that's moving. So that is a tool that PCCD does have now in their possession to see what's going on there, because that informs where trainings could go, right?
Right.
And, as Rob said, this detailed analysis is the first time in 25 years, but I will tell you this kind of solidifies things that we have kind of always known or felt, that there's a large portion of the training population that are not working for the courts. And a large portion of that is they're using our training and certification for other means. Because why would they spend $500, $600, $700 for liability insurance every year to maintain that certification if they're not using it to make money elsewhere? And so the question comes down to is, and I've said this before, the job of this board is to train constables to work for the courts, not anything else. We're not training them, and I hate to say it, but PCCD is now involved in the Safe School Initiative and training for SROs and security guards, etc. I've been pulled into that and fielding a lot of calls from school districts who are using constables
right now
because they're trained and certified. And I do explain to them our training and certification doesn't apply for that. The analogy I give them is if a constable's walking up to serve court process at that school on the principal or the school itself, and something happens and he gets involved, he's good to go. But paying him $15 an hour to stand there for 8 hours as a security guard, our training and certification does not apply. So I think it's very important when we talk about costs, we should only be training guys working for the courts.
Correct.
John, well said. I have a question for you because, so I understand, the compensation system for constables working for the courts, is that a legal entitlement that you get reimbursed for training if you work for the courts? Is there something that's not in? No,
the only thing about pay to the constables is in the fee bill that was a part of the original training act that lists out civil, tasks, criminal tasks, prisoner transport, and there's a miscellaneous docket clause. So that spells out. So if I do these things, this is what I get paid.
But, yeah, it's interesting. We were chatting about that last night, actually. And I don't know how you would explain this to the public. I mean, the public is very astute on some of these things that they're always asking questions. Are we paying for something we shouldn't pay for? For instance, okay, you train a constable, and he goes to work for, let's say, the Indiana County Fair Association for their weekly fair that they have every year. And he gets compensated for that, obviously. But he's being trained using monies from public sources and he's going into a private investment for reimbursement. Is that legal?
Well, and again, Commissioner, whether it's legal or not, I can't tell you. But the issue comes down to is I'm using money that's allocated to train guys to work for the courts. It's generated through the court system, and it's not public money. It's a user fee. It's, and then they go out and they're making personal financial gain. This is my one issue for 25 years. If you're an elected official and you're using your office for personal financial gain, if I'm working security at a private venue, 8 months out of the year as a constable, I'm wearing a constable uniform. I've been and they're counting on my training certification to be their legal cover. Again, I'm not an attorney, but
No, well, I think you're right on, John. I appreciate that comment. I think we have to find and make sure that we are protecting the rights of the people who are paying taxes. I mean, we have lawsuits going on right now, even in our counties right now, because there's questions whether indeed monies are being used for the right purpose from the government.
right. Well, just keep in mind, there's no tax dollars involved. This is
Right.
That's the key point. Is that they don't get paid if they don't work, but if constables don't work, they're not generating that $5 surcharge to come into the training fund. So it's a double-edged sword.
But if you go and ask the legislative team for more money, are you asking for money coming out of a public fund or
No,
surcharge fund?
to increase the surcharge.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
The surcharge is set in
That's all we've
statute.
ever asked for.
Right. The surcharge is set in statute.
Okay.
The legislature has to change it.
Okay,
We can't.
okay.
Okay, General, Mr. Fowle, as you well know, for over 22 years, I authored curriculum. And that we were always specific and taught the curriculum. We were always specific in training the constable that the training they were receiving did not cover working at the county fair. It did not cover working at McDonald's or at the bowling alley or bouncing at a bar. It just covered working for the courts.
But it did not preclude.
And again, that is student public. I don't think they're aware of that, General.
No,
But does it preclude the constable from working?
Well, but I guess the question comes back
That
to,
gets into a legal question.
yeah,
Right.
that's good.
well, first I was going to ask, does anybody have any more questions for Rob? If not,
Well, one of the things
I
that
do.
just,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Angela.
I'm just concerned about this 2016, where it says 506 for training and 0 work for the courts. Is that
Mhm.
accurate? Or?
That is
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that could be possible.
so we have, when this data came to us, we have by constable name, their cert number. So it's not just an amalgamation. We can go in, as Rob referred to, as a unique constable. So I can take a look at you, Anton, and see you through those 3 years. How many dockets you moved in, et cetera, what counties you worked, all that.
Actual numbers.
Right. So, and again, that number of 506, again, that includes guys who ended up failing out of the course, dropping out of the course, completed the course, never got their insurance, So in those cases, we're paying for that. We're paying for partial training, a whole training, or whatever. And now working for the courts, to me, it supports what we know. This
Right.
fracking industry. A lot of these guys are going off and working private security for the gas companies. So, and that's where we go back to is it's kind of like somebody taking, if 235 was free to them, they use 235, but they're using it for some other purpose. It's the same thing. They're utilizing our training because it's free, for other purposes. Because it's cheaper than 235.
It's free.
Rob, just think, one thing on the criminal category. So when you went through and looked at criminal dockets served by constables, the one thing that keeps that number depressed is because most counties are reluctant to issue the criminal warrants to a constable because there's a provision in the law that says if they have not yet been found over to court, if they have not yet gone to a preliminary hearing, if that case is dismissed for whatever reason the DJ throws it out prior to being moved on, the applicant assumes the cost to the constable. So most counties are reluctant to issue those warrants to the constables today because the applicant may be the state police, it may be a city police organization or a sheriff's office, whoever, but there's no ability, they don't have funds to pay constables for going out and serving those types of warrants because they initiated the charge and it went away. So that kind of depresses that category automatically across the board. On the other side, that probably wouldn't pull in the prisoner transports, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the other unknown number we have is that 91% or whatever that you're talking, 90-some% that's other. So landlord, tenant, non-traffic, traffic, but then the visible category to us right now is the prisoner transports.
Well, and if you look, so the service assessments in here, that's one thing we asked. So AOPC, so when we got, this docket number, we asked for how many services did a constable perform on that. So it was interesting, we were looking at, you could tell just by the docket, a constable had 6 services. There was a landlord tenant, so they're back and forth, multiple times. Or, a lot of the other ones, it was just once. As they showed up, they, served something or whatever, collected the money or whatever the case. So those service assessments may or may not include prisoner transports. So on a criminal, it might have 4 service assessments. So you pick the guy up, you transported him to the county jail. A week later, you brought him back for the hearing, and whatever. So we didn't want to beat up AOPCs because then the breakdown of service assessments is even more. We wanted to see what this would give us first.
Right. If I can just address the first part of what you said, I think that's a broad brush because you have to look at the individual county protocol. In Allegheny County, if Antoine serves a criminal warrant, Allegheny County is paying for it. Right. There's no. I don't care what the law says. It's not going back to the applicant. They're not paying for it. Right. Antoine's getting paid. Now in your county, it may be that way. So I think you have to look at the individual. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily a significant. There's certainly a depression. I don't know if it's a significant, because I don't know what the protocol is for the whole damn Commonwealth in each county.
Right. Well, and that has always been part of the struggle here with the numbers. Because the other unknown number for Rob is going to be because of the fact that a docket number can only have a surcharge assessed one time.
Right.
It doesn't show that warrant may have been served. And many times I've got warrants that have been served 6 to 8 times. Failure to pay, drag them back in. Failure to pay, drag them back in. So that's kind of the other number out there that I don't know he can ever be able to latch on to.
Well, so the multiple dockets are showing up in that file. So a docket, we've had dockets show up, dozens of times, and that would be the service assessment on that. We just don't know, drilling down, what is that service assessment that's being performed? Is it a prisoner transport, or is it that they're, finalizing the docket? I don't know. I apologize. I don't know the nomenclature, but we've seen where it can be up to 20 sometimes, if not more, where this docket is going back and forth. And the big ones are the landlord tenant, is they're talking with both parties back and forth, and that counts as one each. So you talk with the landlord, it's one. Talk with the tenant, it's one. And then if I could just really quick piggyback on the 506, because I think it's really important to put financials to it sometimes. And so the average training cost in 2016 when we did the econometric analysis was about $254 per person. 254 times 506, you're looking at $128,000. That would have been expended.
Right, and we actually know it's more than that. In fact, a little later, Wayne will be talking, when we talk about guys paying for basic, we have some actual historical data, financial numbers on what it costs.
Okay. So my other part of it is, I don't know if you can pick this up off your AOPC numbers or not, but depending on where you're at in the Commonwealth, there's a number of counties, a number of district judges in these counties who opt on their own when they have somebody with multiple warrants to only issue like 3. Or they may issue them all to the constable, but they only hand them 3 or 4. They drag the guy in, and then the rest of those warrants are closed out during the arraignment. The judge goes ahead and deals with everything, but only pays cost to the constable on a percentage of it. So sometimes I don't know how that affects your numbers as far as dockets that are simply, the warrant is issued, but there's no fees because it never left the office.
Right.
And it's closed back out.
So real quick, I know you're going to jump in, but we're not seeing anything on the front end in the data set in terms of what's being issued or originated. We're only seeing what's coming in on the back end in terms of what comes into the counties, the MDJs reported. If we would have seen stuff that's being issued and originated, we would be able to validate the 36,000 number from Westmoreland, but that's not showing up. What we're seeing is whatever was executed.
These are all dockets that a constable executes.
Okay.
So as you said,
A constable actually touched every
right,
single
right,
one.
constable
Yes,
touched
there
it.
was a
So,
service assessment.
and again, going back to the assessment of the surcharge, that's been our issue for years. We don't know is it being assessed? Is it being assessed at the full $5? Is it being assessed at $1? And then the factor of it's assessed today at $5, but that guy's not picked up for 12, 14 months. We don't see that $5 until
And John, it's the other thing that you mentioned last year, which is very true. You got somebody that's on a $20 a month or $10 a month payment schedule, and the surcharge might get 28 cents
Right.
Correct.
once a month from that docket number. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Well, we talked about the prioritization of how the money is filtered out.
That's the first thing
in
that should be paid.
the computer program, so that's our other struggle.
So
It's a great report, Rob. I'll be honest with you. I just I'm not condemning the report. I'm just throwing out the other variables that.
That's the good thing about any of this. PCCD doesn't control this data. This comes from the MDJs. It originates there. It goes to AOPC. We're just the stewards of it to perform the analysis. So at the end of the day, the good thing is the data is what the data is, and that's where it's coming from. And so we just sort of let it speak and tell us what's happening, and help guide some decision making.
Well, from this data, we're going to have to make a decision whether or not we want to, break into a group or, where we go from here with this data, since it's.
Yeah. Well, why don't we let Rob and his cohort get back to their stewardship?
I think Constable Hollenbaugh had a question.
Sure. I know it's not public time now, but just real quick, there's two things I wanted to ask specifically you to clear up for me. First off, you had said 35% of constables, this 2018 number, I'm sorry, on your very first page. Yeah, of that 2018 number of 50% of actually doing court work, of that only 35% collected enough constable education fund to pay for their specific training.
Yes, so back in April we presented to, and I think it was the work group, and so we got data from AOPC to tentatively look through, what were the dockets being collected per unique constable, right? Identifying that constable by their certification number. And so what we did is we said, okay, what would be the board's investment in that person, right? Average cost to train that person to keep their certification.
this is Con Ed and firearms on it.
And we have that PDF report, so we can kick it over to you, and John will distribute it. What we found in there is there's sort of subpopulations of constables. You have a good cadre of folks who are really high performers. They're going out and getting 5 figures worth of dockets, right? And then there's some that there's every year one. And so if I invested, just from a financial analysis, $254 in that person per year, and they got 1 docket and brought in $5, right? We lost $219 on that sort of investment. And I know it's kind of tough because it's a livelihood and stuff, but sometimes it's important to divorce the emotion from that and say there is an implicit business relationship there. So that's where the 35% comes from. There was another 15% there that when we said, okay, how much would it take to get back to that? So 254 times 5, right? That's the number of dockets, right? That's sort of what it was, and that was that 15% that never came back to what we called like the break even sort of point. And then there were some folks on the other side that they just barely broke even. So that was presented in April or May. I'll kick that to John. I think you actually have it, and we can distribute that. I don't think there's anything in there that's sensitive. I think that's available.
When you look at the vast majority, we're kind of in that break-even point, or slightly under or slightly over.
So my question is that actually, are you talking about actual the money collected that's sent to the fund or just the docket served? So for instance, I serve a docket, you may not get that $5 for 3
Right.
years, but it's going
Right.
to show up that I served that paper on that year.
Right. So it was an assumption. It was
Yeah.
number of dockets, assuming a $5 surcharge, because we didn't have the hard numbers to know if it was $1, $2.
That's even worse.
And so by setting it at the $5, right, that's the most liberal estimate. So even if you're at 15, right, 15%, it might actually be, there might be other guys in there that are spilling over into that to increase that sort of subpopulation up to 20, 25% based on the amount of revenue that's generated.
And then one other question, the
Sure.
one for you, table of unique constables working in dockets by county, very first page here.
Sure.
That total number, 857, that's an individual constable in each county that's served, but does that number reflect constables that say we're in Adams County but also serve dockets out of Blair, Bucks, and Columbia? Could it be the same number, same person, just the numbers there?
Yes, exactly. So at any one point, we just looked at the certification code, how many people are around the state who are performing court work. It was 857. Most of those folks are working in more than one county. So you'll have folks in Adams County that are traveling to Allegheny County, or there's something there where, there's a transfer of the docket or however that's happening.
Now, there's nobody in Adams County traveling to work in Allegheny County, because they get a one-way ticket out.
Right. So yeah, even if the DJ and Adams are sending it to Allegheny or vice versa,
Yeah.
It's still showing up. We're at least still seeing, hey, this constable's getting a lot of out of county work, whether he's physically going there or it's coming into his county.
It happens to me. I mean, the stuff gets mailed into me by courts. I don't solicit it.
Right.
But they find out, they'll call the local DJ closest to the address and say, who's out there? They'll tell them next thing, in the mail, I'll get, a warrant.
Right.
So, yeah, and there's times I've gone to that other county, when I walk in, the constable will say, you're in here poaching. I hear that word poaching, No, I just, got sent to me and they said, bring him in. So here we are.
Yeah, and so the top 10 counties which would have the highest percentage of unique constables is this sort of chart right here. So it's all the counties I think you would expect, but there are some ones in there that are really kind of startling. Columbia, for one. I don't know if there's anything else in there that pops out to folks, since what's going on out boots on the ground.
I'm actually surprised to see Columbia, because Columbia traditionally doesn't use constables for court work when it comes to warrants. I know that they use a very few number of constables for that, but that's shocking. So 35% of constables are paying for 100% of constables.
I mean, there was individuals that were literally moving 15,000, 16,000 dockets in a year. So,
John, can I ask one more question? Does any of this reflect common pleas work, or is this all magisterial stuff?
this is all at the MDJ level.
Yeah.
In talking with AOPC, their data collection, because we've been trying to get it on deputy sheriffs to do the same kind of analysis, because the Court of Common Pleas has been around, their system's older. A lot of we would have to go to every county to try and get Court of Common Pleas data, but we just don't have that time or resources right now.
Understood.
So,
Mike, you had a question?
Well, that was back to that 2016 group with nobody working at all. Could they maybe start up in 17 or 18? Now, I still say there isn't many.
Sure.
I see a few come back, but I don't. That zero is really a pounding
Yeah.
number to none of them.
So we
Any work.
we ran that 506 number through all 3 years. It all came back as a zero. The 2017 cohort and 2018 cohort dropped by, it was like 150 that were trained in that, because it was the non-election sort of cycle. And what you saw is an increase in the certification rate. I think it was like a 93-7% split. So 7% of people being trained were no longer passing training, right? 93% were. But none of those folks were working for the court. So we kept the analysis on 2016 there, simply because it was the largest for the election year. But yeah, each constable has that unique certification code, and we reconciled that with PCCD's data with what came through on AOPC to show that certification code. Not a single one of those certification codes matched.
So, you know, I think in 2016 we ran like 12 or 13 basics. and then
17.
17.
17.
And so think about the dollars right there. And, you know, and we all have heard it takes a guy a little bit to get established. So we should have at least seen, hey, in 16 he had 1 docket. In 17 he had 5. You know, in 18 maybe he had 10. Because he's got to get a DJ to trust him or whatever. But we didn't even see that. And to me, that tells me, guys, hey, it's free training. Now I go work for the gas company. So.
And it may be true that it's taking some folks to sort of, a few years to scale up to that. But I think if you look at the first chart, that's not what's happening with the vast majority. You're losing people. And it's probably more pronounced than the folks that would be gaining or scaling up, would be my hypothesis. I don't have data to validate that. But when you see a trend line going like that, and then to say there's going to be some folks that might take some time to scale up, it would have to be a huge cohort of people to move that needle back up.
Now, my gut is if you could pull those certification numbers and physically send somebody out in the field to find out where they're working, I think we'll answer the question. You know, they paid the money to go through the training, but they went to work elsewhere. And I think we could. That's the only way you could really validate what happened. But my belief is that's what's going on. Because why pay the state police or the schools that they approve $500-600, do a psych and do all those things, and to get a 235 card when and have to pay money out of your pocket to get all that done, when you come here for free. Right. And these companies are from a lot of them, these frac companies are out of Texas. That constable in Texas versus the constable in Pennsylvania. Corporate in Houston has no clue, and they really don't care. You show up with a card that says, yeah, you're firearm certified, you're elected the Commonwealth, boom, we'll hire you. I think that's what's going on. It's the out-of-state companies that don't realize what the 235, Act 235 is all about, and they're accepting this 49 card, and that's what's going on. And we're paying. We're paying.
Sure.
Craig, and I could say, I had talked with a lady at the general manager's assistant at the Mohegan Sun Arena, where the Wilkesboro Penguins play, and she was asking for certification information for constables. When I told her, I said, I can't give you that information. What are you using this for? Well, my parent company wants to see the certification information for these constables because they're providing security here at the arena. And I said, I'm telling you right up front, our training and certification does not cover them to do private security. They need to have Act 235. Oh, well, I didn't know that. So then I proceeded to send her information. She got back to me and she said, you're absolutely right. We are not going to contract with constables anymore. Right there's a perfect point. And they've been doing that for years.
I know I should keep my mouth shut because I'm new.
No, feel free.
Let me ask you.
We need some French hot air here.
Well, have we ever got a legal opinion whether that certification is good only for constable work or?
Yes, and historically the program, we've encountered multiple issues, between DAs and going after guys. And yes, our certification. In fact, in our training now, in every training class, there's about 4 or 5 slides that say, this is what it's for. This is why we teach what we teach. Any reference to police or law enforcement in case law, it's for that training purpose. It doesn't imply anything. Okay. Yep.
Then my follow-up question is, then as a board, did we have the power to say, okay, if you don't work actively for a court in the previous calendar year for so many cases, you cannot get certified, be recertified?
And that's where we've been moving. And we're had those discussions.
Yeah. We're trying to get there.
We're trying to get there to say, hey, you work for the courts, you're coming to training, no problem. You don't work for the courts, you're not coming to training. So that's where we've been shifted to. Okay. We're heading that direction.
That makes sense. I
think one other statement I'd like to make about this is I've been here for all the work groups, and I'm pretty active in constable world. I think one of the things that really bothers me more than anything is when I hear about the numbers like that the commissioner had said, 32,000 active warrants. So when a constable tells me they can't get work, I think it's complete shit. Excuse my French. There's enough work out there.
36,000 more.
Well, the reason Allegheny County is because they're not allowed to.
Right.
In Westmoreland County. Okay. By court order, they're not permitted to work.
Okay. But then you have a number like Lancaster County with 120,000 active warrants or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
my point is, there's our nomenclature, our state gives us the ability to travel anywhere in the state.
Exactly.
Like work. So just because your local judge doesn't give you the ability to serve a warrant doesn't mean that there's not other counties out there dying to have you come in and help work out. But anyway.
And that sort of speaks to what's going on here. You have only 11% of folks traveling outside of their home county to do that. So there's a lot of people that my hypothesis would be they don't want to leave the confines of their county to perform that work. Either they don't want to do it or they don't know that it exists somewhere else.
Or the judge doesn't want to
Correct.
use somebody from out of town.
Right. Exactly. And the DA doesn't, because the DA has no real authority over that constable in terms of administratively. So, and that's a trend too. So.
All right, so we'll continue, as Rob said, we're going to collect this data every year from AOPC. So as we make changes to the training program, we can see what the impact is as far as guys working for the courts. So,
Rob, we can call you if you want to dig deeper into this. We have other questions on that. Okay.
And we will also take these PDFs and post them out on the public PCCD website then as well.
yeah, just so they post it out there. So, thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
How about a round of applause for Rob?
Yeah, I'm telling you, man. Stand up, take a bow, take a bow.
Thank you guys.
Is he awake back there?
No, he's not. He's put him to sleep.
I like being fly on the
He
wall.
went blind.
Wait, can you get the lights? The light. Wait, can you get the lights? Yeah, somebody.
I told my wife I'd be home by Friday night, so
Well, then
All right.
you need to stay quiet, Judge.
There we go. All right, moving on here to
Page 14.
14. That would be
The issue of non-constables.
issue on constables. John, go ahead, run with that.
So over the last meetings, we've talked about, what about allowing non-constables to pay full price to take the basic training as kind of a revenue generator or a revenue to make at least it financially neutral. So, if we end up running a class with 3 or 4 openings, a non-constable can pay full price, take the The board used to do this. They instituted it early on, and by 2009, they decided this practice, it was not very productive, caused a lot of issues. Non-constables bumping out a constable, who just got appointed on the training seat, so the board in 2009, by 2010, they got rid of that practice. So we've been through this before for several years, and it's just not efficient. And basically, this information here is some of the information we reviewed in 2009 and 10 as to why the board got rid of it. We really weren't generating really any money. There were problems, so let's say there's openings and I pay to go to the class, but to register I had to pay my money up front, so I pay that in June, the class is September. Well, July or August I cancel out. It was a real headache for staff to go back through comptroller, treasury to refund that guy's money. I mean, it was just a painful process, and they ate up a lot of staff time that could be dedicated on other things. In 2010, I think it down there shows we only had 6 individuals pay, and it only amounted to about $3,300. So having someone who's anticipating being appointed or wants to, become a constable, go through the training, it's just not worth it for us. So,
And this was part of a motion that was made at the May meeting.
Right.
That was approved by the board, and that's why we want to bring this information back to the board.
Well, to be honest with you, my frustration was this basic training class we had right here at Dixon, right out of the blocks. We had a guy there basically waiting. If we had a waiting list that was authorized and they had their money in hand when they show up at class, if we have empty slots. But the sad part of it was within a couple of days of that first basic training weekend, there was multiple seats that were open. So we have an instructor we're paying, we got a facility there that we're using, we got everything in place to train 30 people or whatever that magic number was, and what do we got? 25 or 24. And it's another wasted resource. I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can, you can't mandate they be there, but if they walk away, I'd like to have some ability on that first weekend to plug other people into those empty seats.
but I think, Craig, And the other half of that same motion we're going to visit here shortly in the transition policy is everybody pays for basic training up front. And as we talked about, I think that will reduce, because you're right, some of those people cancel out, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, that day or Thursday.
Yep.
You know, so if you don't have any skin in the game,
Yep, exactly.
you know, yeah, I can cancel. I'm not going this weekend. But if you're paying, and we'll get to that other portion where everybody pays for basic and basic firearms up front, full cost, I think the amount of people signing up for training is going to drop, first of all. Second of all, how many people drop out because now they have an investment in it, they're going to stick it out.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm looking forward to the fact that, okay, now all of a sudden, if this is what you gotta pay to come here, or you pay a lesser amount to go do the 235 thing, because my goal is I just wanna go do security stuff, it'll route them in the right direction, is what I'm thinking.
So,
Head this thing off right from the get-go.
so we'll send a lot of population to PSP. Their training will go up.
So there's like a motion to, for the board to continue to not allow non-constables to attend the 80-hour basic training. All attendees at the basic training classes would need to be currently holding office to enroll and attend as per our regulations.
John, I was looking at that and I was ready to make that motion, but it's already passed. I mean, it's already in the books, right? The board's already passed it.
The motion was made at the last meeting to allow non-constables. And so we're coming back to you with that information for you to take action. So you're just continuing current practice.
Yeah.
Right.
All we're asking is, because that motion's on the record of allowing all you have to do is we're going to continue current practice.
Do we need a motion on that and vote on it? Okay, then I'll make
Yes,
that
please.
motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, ayes have it. Alrighty, transition 2020.
So getting
board.
into what John was stating, we'll get right into the transition policy. So section 3, and this is the policy that we started last year when we started implementing the, if you fail the qualification course of fire, we remove your firearm certification as soon as that failure occurs. So we're just expanding upon this transition policy to get us through this period. So section 3,
Page 18.
yes, page 18 of the board packet. A constable or deputy constable who fails a basic training, basic firearms, continuing education, or firearms qualification course after January 1st of 2020 shall bear the financial responsibility to attend an additional course regardless of the training year in which the failure occurs. The current practice is, if I fail in 2019 and I want to come back and take another class in 2019, I pay to go to that class. If I wait until 2020, I have a clean slate and I come back and I do not have to pay for that failure. So what we are asking, and this also came out of the work group conversations and meetings that we had last year, is that regardless of when that failure occurs, that person, if they fail any class that we are holding, that they have to pay to come back and retake that class, regardless of the training year. So that is what section 3 is pertaining to, is training course failures. And then section 4 is what John alluded to here earlier, that any elected or appointed constable or deputy constable must pay for the expenses related to both the basic training and the basic firearms training courses starting January 1 of 2020. So if we have a class of 40 that we would be putting on for basic training next year, all 40 of those constables and deputy constables would have to pay a predetermined cost to attend that training course. Those costs would be published annually based upon the actual cost that it takes for us to put on that training class. And we will, if you have, we could get into, there was a handout that was handed out as well that had cost association, training cost associated, and then the methodology that was used. Wayne did a lot of work on this. He went through, and the average cost that we pay for a training class did not previously include the administrative cost. So that was for PCD staff and also the administrative staff at the schools as well. So what he did is he went through and he actually got the actual cost of what it cost us to put on a training class. So if you look at the bottom of the first page there with the true training cost per constable, he has come up that the true training cost for us to put on that class for training year 2017-2018 was $1,123 for basic training.
I'm sorry, what page is that?
That was just provided to the board. I don't know
okay.
that we handed out for the audience. For basic firearms, it was $1,483. So a total investment of about $2,600 for a constable or deputy constable to go through our training classes. And then if there are any questions on that or any questions on Wayne's methodology that he used to come up with those training costs?
I think it speaks for itself, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've been discussing. Do you have any questions, Major?
No.
We need a motion on this?
Yes, we do.
I'll make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Was that just on section 4 you're voting on?
It's the whole policy.
It's the whole policy.
The whole policy,
Okay.
yeah, the whole policy.
So then the policy will then go to the September commission meeting, because the commission has to sign off
Right.
on policy changes from the.
And we have asked Constable Bruno to come attend that meeting,
Very good.
the commission meeting, to present that to the commission then as well.
Very persuasive.
Yeah, I know in the past, and I just want to throw this out for discussion, I know many times we talk about passing a concept like this, but we don't put any inflationary growth into it, so every year, are we gonna be readdressing this?
It'll be
Yes,
recalculated.
that is in the policy itself. It does state
And that's
that
why the dollar amount's not in the policy, because we'll publish it every year as
Okay.
costs.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and we did state that would be published annually, on an annual basis.
Because surely with your online training, that those costs could, the Con Ed costs, so, will fluctuate. I mean, if you bring more online, it's gonna go up or down, based on what's gonna cost you for the content. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, it's good.
Do we do an all in favor, say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on.
Thank you.
Sherry.
The next action item is going to be the 2020 meeting schedule. Basically, I went through the calendar for 2020. I looked at the primary and general election dates. None of these dates conflict with that at all. And basically, we just need a motion to approve that. And we will get that publicized as well.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Discussion items. John and Sherry, do you want to lead with that?
Actually, I'll turn this over to Wayne. If you
Wayne?
don't mind, he did all the research
I'm sorry,
on this.
Wayne.
Yeah,
That's okay.
basically, when you look at the law enforcement and psychological testing, you can see constables, there's no requirement, deputy sheriffs, there's no basically in statute, but I'm sure that most of the counties, before they'll send them to the deputy sheriff school, they do have psychologicals. County probation does not have any in statute. I think the real test that, when you look at that, is Act 120, 235, PSP, Game Commission, the Fish and Boat Commission. They all have it in statute. It's all in statute. I'm not quite sure how our board would, if they would pass it, how we could actually enforce it.
Mm.
It should be done by statute. So.
And this research was done based upon a motion that was made at the May meeting, so we're just coming back to you with additional information on
Well,
this.
I think this is something that has to be addressed by the legislature.
Yeah.
And at this point, for the
It
board,
doesn't cost anything.
right, for the board to try and put something in place, I don't think it would get us anything.
Right.
I think focusing our attention on who goes to training and for what reason will get us a lot
Yeah,
more.
exactly. This is down the road.
We need a motion to forward it to whoever, not?
No, it was
We
just
table-
a discussion, we're just
discussion.
providing a comparison as to
That's it.
what's required out there.
You want to table this for a later date, or can we do that, or just we'll
Yeah,
just
we can.
table that for a later date?
Right in small print, discuss.
Discussed. Table. Okay. Second weapons qualification.
I'll take that one. During this whole transition with the reduction in training, I know I've been out to monitor many annual qualification classes this year, and I get lots of questions on second weapons. Currently, there is no mandate in the Act or the regulations that we are required to allow second weapon qualifications. We do understand there's officer safety issues in relation to second weapons. If a first weapon malfunction occurs, the constable would have that second weapon to replace it. We do allow, if a malfunction occurs, we do work with the training coordinators to get that individual into the very next annual qualification course to get them to requalify with a new weapon for that malfunctioning weapon. And here again, we get into they must be performing work for the courts in order to attend and attempt to qualify with a second weapon. We were looking at bringing back just a second class date or a second weapon class type for 2020, but when we looked at the numbers of the individuals that have qualified in the past with a second weapon, at this point in time, it is just not fiscally responsible for us to do that. If you look at the 2016 numbers and the training year 2016, we had 1,025 individuals who qualified with weapon 1, 480 that qualified with the second weapon. We look at 2017, 998 qualified with weapon 1, 457 qualified with the second weapon. 2018, 941 qualified with a weapon 1, 449. Now, and then if we look into what Rob just presented, how many of those 941 are actually performing work for the courts? Right. Is it in our best interest when there is no mandate to take on this additional financial responsibility to have constables certified with a second weapon?
Absolutely.
And again, this is open for discussion. I mean, I just wanted to bring this to your attention, go over the statistics and have a discussion regarding this.
Discussion?
Well, I was going to say, in the board, once we kind of get who's going to training for what reason, we get that locked down, the board can always revisit it,
yes,
at a future date.
That would be my favor, is to revisit it. I would do it unless it's mandated, given our financial status right now. I would do anything.
And I've been out on the firing range for all these years, and I've asked a lot of guys, why do you do a second weapon? You know what their answer is? Well, Craig, just in case I'm in a car crash, my house burns down, I have a catastrophic failure. Okay, great, but the chances of that happening are pretty slim. I mean, if you're carrying some sort of a modern day firearm, it's pretty reliable, and most armors can fix whatever the issue is. But to have a catastrophic failure, the percentages just aren't there.
Let me ask this question to Mike, who is a captain of state police and major as well. If I have a Glock 17, all right, 9mm, which we're qualified on, but for some reason the thing explodes, whatever, can I go out and get another Glock 17, 9mm, and it's the same gun? I mean, would I have to re-qualify with that? It's the same exact firearm?
Yeah, no. I mean, we have malfunctions with our guns, and we have spare guns or weapons at each station where they replace them with the exact same gun.
It's the exact same gun, so I wouldn't need to re-qualify.
You're already qualified on
I'm
that
already
weapon.
qualified with that weapon. Okay, different serial number, but with that weapon.
Right.
Well, and I will say, and just very cursory, looking at those guys with second weapons,
right,
they're rarely identical weapons.
No, they're not.
They're
It's
usually
a
a compact weapon,
right,
or whatever.
okay.
So historically, most constables they're two different weapons that they're.
Just wanted to clarify, that if you did have a malfunction.
And they will say, well, my fear is I won't be able to get into a class in order to qualify with another gun. If my first gun goes down, that's what we're worried about. So I understand the structure, the bureaucratic structure of trying to get into another class so I understand that concern, but to be honest with you, financially, it's not responsible at this time to do this. It's just in there.
What do we need to do on this?
This was just a discussion item, and the board made it clear that we can revisit it at a later date.
Okay, great.
So I just wanted to get back to the board on this.
Fantastic. Moving on, informational items, AOPC data.
Yeah.
We did that. Right, it was Rob. How about the 4-hour annual qualification
That would
update?
be me.
Sherry.
Okay, as of Monday, with our last annual qualification class, we've had a total of 60 classes that were scheduled this year for a total of 1,200 constables that could sign up for classes. So far, we've held 40 of those classes. We've trained and completed and passed was the number of constables was 584. We had a total number of 46 failures, 3 of which were double failures. So that means that they failed the first attempt and the second attempt. They went back, paid, went back and took another class, and failed the first attempt and the second attempt. So 3 double failures this year so far. The overall failure rate so far this year is about 7.7%, which is not bad at all.
How does that compare to previous years?
It's double.
Yeah, it is
Double
double.
the
Yeah.
previous years.
Yeah. It was probably like 3.5, 3.4% in previous years.
Any idea?
Well, it's because these guys aren't having that day and a
That
half of
practice.
range
Mhm.
time.
So
You know, you're coming in, you take your test, you get your safety brief, and you shoot cold.
Yep,
And,
yep.
you know, in some of the classes I've been out seeing, it shows.
There's no remedial.
Right.
Yeah, and they're not practicing before they go to classes. We've had 3 individuals fail on phase 1 after 2 attempts. We've had 42 fail on phase 2 after 2 attempts. We've had 1 person fail on the written test after 2 attempts. So there's our 46 failures for this year. We've had 4 no-shows at classes, 2 malfunctions. Those individuals were able to get into other classes and requalify. 9 excused absences, and then we've had 2 firearm safety issues so far this year. We've had a total number of 5 that have failed the first time on the written test, and then that 1 that failed twice on the written test. We have 20 classes remaining. We have total spots of 38 spots available left throughout the state. 5 in the Northwest, 24 in the Southwest, and 9 in the Southeast. We've had 23 people who have failed but have not paid to enroll in that second class. So what we're assuming is they're going to wait until next year they get a clean slate so they can go to class free of charge. Because now the new motion in the transition policy, that will start January 1 of 2020. So when we have failures in 2020, if they want it, regardless of when that failure occurs, they're going to have to pay based upon that failure. So basically, I mean, we have 23 individuals that failed and have not signed up for paid and signed up for a second class of those 46 that we've had go through that have failed this year.
Do we know on the no-shows, you said you had a total of 4 no-shows so far?
Yes.
Do we know how that compares to previous years?
I do not, but I know for certain that our no-show rates have gone down considerably since we've been hitting them in the
So I figured that was going to happen. I
Yes.
just, in my own mind, I thought we go aggressive on this thing, that's going to happen.
Yeah, and we're tracking it aggressively.
Plus, on a no-show, it doesn't matter. 3 years from now, if you decide to come back for that con ed, you were a no-show, you pay for it.
Those no-shows
You
are
pay for it.
forever.
The no-show
So
is
even if it's
forever.
10 years from now,
Right.
I mean, we're all gone and retired, that no-show's still going to show.
So
You'll
the
still be
pocketbook
here, Chef.
strategy.
No, I will not.
Just counting down.
Right, Chair, the pocketbook strategy works.
Yes, it does.
Mhm.
Yes, it does. Yeah, I know the no-show, and that's something I could look into though, Craig, for next meeting, just to see what our no-show rates have gone down over the past few years. I'll take a look at that and get back to you on that. But I know it's gone down considerably.
Yeah, especially some of the earlier years, it was really
Triple
high.
digits, like hundreds of people would show, they'd sign up for a class and just wouldn't show.
Yeah.
And also SETS helps with that too, to keep track of that, because now we can put restrictions on, they can't enroll in classes because they're restricted until they make that payment for that no-show, so.
But I hate to be, somebody sitting there with a hammer, but financially, everybody's got to realize, the ship is going down, so we are doing everything to plug holes, and unfortunately, that's the business world, and
we have. And we have to continue to.
Yep. We're continuing to put the Band-Aids on.
Okay, do you have any comments on that? Any questions, Constable Pete? Any questions?
When these failures, are they like the question and answers prior to the class, or, you know, the
That,
actual?
it's actually the actual qualification. We've had 5 fail at the first time on the written test. They took it the second time and passed.
Okay.
And we've had 1 failure on the written test after 2 attempts.
Okay.
So all the other.
Do you have an
45
example of the test that we can look at?
No, I do not here with
Yeah,
me now.
the test, we have the study guides posted out there in sets. It's a 14-page, covers the fundamentals of, marksmanship, safety. I mean,
And we've been encouraging constables.
I'll be honest with you, the hunter safety course is probably harder. And it's a 10 or 12 question test.
Yeah, and if you've been
I
paying
mean,
attention for the last
if
25 years,
you-
you shouldn't
yeah.
have any issues.
Right, it's basic fundamentals of safety.
If you look at the disc from previous years, maybe your computer disc, it's probably got the same questions.
Well, there's a study guide out.
Yeah, there's a study guide out
We
on
published
the-
a
on
study
the
guide out
website.
there.
It's out there on the constable website, right?
And I could forward these firearm stats to the board then if you'd like to, so you have them.
Now,
Yeah, I can
do
do
we
that.
take the test online, the written test,
Yes,
or is
yeah.
that taken? when
No,
we
it's
get
in
to-
class.
it's in
We're
class?
gonna move it to online,
Right.
actually. So.
But right now, it's
Hey, Chairman.
Yes.
I want to add one thing before we close up, and this was for an email, and I received this from a constable, and I want to read the email to you, and this will kind of light up what we've been talking about throughout this entire meeting. And I won't mention the guy's name, but he wanted me to bring it to the board. So, Craig, nice speaking with you moments ago. As you know, technology is changing rapidly. Drones were toys not too many years ago. Now they are very sophisticated and can be in the wrong hands deadly. They can travel at great speeds and carry a fair amount of weight. These are the drones available to the citizen and corporations, not military. That said, in my travels, I've noticed signs on fair venues, the use of drones prohibited. I spoke to the FAA and were very cooperative in educating me on what a law enforcement officer is supposed to do. Still don't have the complete answer yet, but my advantage is I'm a licensed pilot. This helped with rules and regulations, airspace, etc. Most people are concerned about privacy. The FAA is concerned about the dark side, mass killings. I'd like to see the Pennsylvania State Constable ahead of the curve on the enforcement issues I've described above. We all do more than work for the courts. If I can be of any assistance to this issue, please feel free to call. So I told the guy I'd read into the minutes of the meeting. But this kind of, lights up the fact that we have a heck of a lot of people, constables, that are working these festivals and things of that nature. And now we're looking at, drone training. You could go on into infinity, all the different types of training you can do out there. But the fact of the matter is, do we have a role in that? Is that Pennsylvania State Police's role? Is that, a local sheriff's role? I don't know. The drones is a new technology. The drones, now here's what's coincidental. 2 days prior to his call, I was at a festival, but I don't work festivals because I believe in what I practice what I preach. But I was there to arrest a guy. While I'm there to arrest the guy, a drone come falling out of the sky and landed less than 3 feet away from people that were watching the concert. And of course, the first thing that happened was all these little kids come running over and they grabbed the drone and started playing with it. About 10 minutes later, and because I looked at my watch, it took 10 minutes for the show up that was flying this thing and crashed into this festival. I said, "You're lucky you didn't hit anybody." "Oh, I know, I lost control." That is, there's no doubt in my mind, this is an issue coming down the pike, but unfortunately, we're not equipped to do that. And as far as training for drones and training for all this stuff, this is just, financially way beyond any means that we have or scope of the law.
It's the 1% thing. I've said this for years. We can't train 1,200 guys on something that's a 1% or less occurrence. We have to focus on what are the common core tasks that they execute for the courts.
So, but I got into the record.
Okay.
I promised the constable I'd do that, and I did.
Thank you very kindly. I think at this time we're going to break for executive session. I have to ask all our guests and attendees to please take a break and step out till we conclude that. I need a motion to go into executive session.
Yeah.
You go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
I'm gonna leave.
All in favor?
Aye.
No.
Any opposed?
Good try.
No opposed?
That's right.
Ayes have it. We're now in executive session.
As long as you can basically saying this we need to discuss a personnel issue and then move it. Okay.
Everybody back?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming back. Reason why we broke an executive session was for a personnel issue. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to Judge Tom Blair.
Okay, I would like to make a motion. I am making a motion to permanently ban Constable Lance Fisher from the training providers, training sites, permanently. Firearms training, I'm sorry.
You made a motion, I'll second your motion.
All in favor of the
Aye.
motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Before you go into public voice, I just want to give a quick update on the online training. That's moving forward. The module for next year has been developed. Staff's gone through it. And I went through it as if I'd never been exposed to this material. I clicked on, there's bonus materials in there. I went through it as if I was brand new and never been exposed to this material. We're calling it a 4-hour module. It took me 3 hours, 15 minutes, as casual pace. So the module looks really well. Every Wednesday, we now have a Skype call with Temple. Temple will be the LMS platform that the training resides on. So we're talking with them every Wednesday on integrating our system sets to be able to talk to Canvas, which is the LMS system, so that when a constable takes training, we get the grades, it shows up. So if a guy looks in their training record, they see that they got credit for that online training, etc. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes on that on the IT side. Eric, our developer, is going to be very busy. He's very busy now on that, but I think we're on target for the January to have that online module available. I will say we have to live within our current board regulations. So when guys sign up for training, they're going to end up signing up for the classroom and the online simultaneously. It's just how we're going to have to do it the first year. In future iterations, they'll be independent of each other. But does anybody have any questions on the online?
Okay, before we go into public voice, just let me run down anything for the good of the order. Speed, Wayne, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Westover, Judge,
That's it.
Constable, Derek, one for me.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, open for public voice. Sir,
I'll go first.
please stand.
It's
State your name.
It's Constable Hollabaugh, Adams County, also here to represent the Commonwealth Constable Association. Adams County.
Please speak up just a little bit, Constable Hollabaugh. Thank you.
Come up closer.
Yeah, come up close. Let us see what you really look like. Come on.
You look good.
I
Yeah,
didn't dress up today. This is my field uniform.
that's quite all right. That's see, you're in the
Nice of
field.
you to comb your hair a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm 7 children, so I don't have hair. This is Constable Hollabaugh from Adams County, represents the Commonwealth Constable Association and the Adams County Constable Association. I had just a couple quick questions from what came out of today. Number one, is there any way at all to do a sample with those numbers that now that we have the data from all the statistics, get a sample to send some emails out or a questionnaire or something like that to these constables who never served a single court document, just to try to find out, is it truly what we think, which is they're probably working with the coal mines or the pipelines or whatever like that, or is it that they can't work for the courts? I think I have my suspicions on what it is, but I'd be interested to see, obviously you can't send one out to all 200 of them or 500 of them, wherever it is, but a sample would be nice.
Yeah, we can look into something. It's easy enough.
Yeah, it may not be this year. It may be early 2020 until staff could get around to it. But I see no issues doing something like that.
I mean, I know for a fact from doing this job full time now for almost 8 years or 7 years, that, and I meet these guys. I meet these constables out there. Like I know these constables out there that will tell me I don't do core work. I don't ever want to do core work, but they make $60,000 a year working for whatever XYZ corporation. So it would be interesting to see if they came back and were truthful.
How could you have 2/3 on?
My second question is, there was a lot of talk about a second firearm. Now, I, for one, have never qualified with a second firearm because I believe this has been brought up before, that if I ever use this weapon in defense of myself or others, and it's taken from me, for the investigation, that I believe this has been brought up before, that I can go out and buy and get the same make and model weapon, and it'll be certified on this same weapon. I'll just have to give you guys a serial number. But, and I don't know if this is a large population, how many officers carry one as a backup?
Right.
You know what I'm saying, like an ankle holster or something. I actually, Major, I was curious, is the state police even authorize troopers to carry a second weapon? So then obviously the state police, which is the benchmark for law enforcement in Pennsylvania, they authorize their troopers to carry a second firearm. They see some value in that. We're talking about just getting rid of it. I thought that was something that maybe we were going to come back to if the budget got better.
No, and like I said, I think we can come back to it at some point. It's not going to happen in 2020. And like I said, when you look at that second weapon, most of them are compact. They're a smaller version, or they're a totally different weapon.
Something as a backup.
Right.
Right.
And so, if we do, we could probably do a survey on secondary weapon, just to get better data.
Okay, just to follow up on your point to Major, do they qualify on that second weapon?
Yes.
They do qualify?
Yes, that's it. Labeled as an off-duty weapon, but then they have to submit, they qualify as an off-duty, but then they can submit paperwork request to carry it on duty too.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering myself.
Yep.
Is there any guidelines that you put out for that second weapon they have to follow?
Yeah, there's only certain models of weapons that they can carry, and we have a list of banned weapons that they can't carry because maybe the trigger's too light, or maybe there's just a safety issue with the gun or something like that.
No high points. The other question I had is, we talked a lot about, in the statistics portion, about tracking a docket and trying to find out if that docket was for a transport or if that docket was for another reason, not really trying to understand whether it's for a warrant and the constable's going out re-executing a warrant for a person pay. Isn't that what the warrant control number is for?
No, it showed up. It told us what kind. It's a civil, it's a criminal, it's a non-traffic. On the transport stuff, we didn't ask for it at this point, but we can go back and do that, is where it had the number of services. So if there were 6 services,
sure,
we can just guess, that's a landlord tenant, so we're assuming there's no transport involved.
Got it.
So again, the volume of data, this set of data alone was over 600,000 lines in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So
it was well put together. I enjoyed it. I was very horrified by the results, to be honest with you, but I thought it was well done. Almost done, I swear. I was just recently, I don't know if anybody here in the room went to it or not, but I was at the FBI's Northeast Law Enforcement Symposium that they put on up at Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area. It was a 2-day course, and it brought up, I went there, and I've gone to many of these kind of like training evolutions, and it brought up an idea for me that I wanted to approach the board with, and I don't know if it's ever been mentioned before, but right there on the sign-in table, you had to do law enforcement to go and you sign in, was the MOPEC training form. MOPEC requires X amount of continuing education hours per year. And so officers that were Act 120 that went to this thing were able to sign up for this course and then received some credit for continuing education for the next year. Has that ever been thought of or brought up to the board before?
We have discussed that, yes.
We did.
Accepting outside training as, counting towards your Con Ed or whatever.
Yeah. And I think the general consensus, John, correct me if I'm not correct, the general consensus was because of the uniqueness of the Pennsylvania Constable. I'm sure there are courses out there that could be applicable, but because there are, you do tasks that no other law enforcement officer does.
Yes, absolutely.
And what would we waive, right, John?
Right, and one of the things that, because it did come up in the work groups and that kind of stuff, and that's still on the list of future items.
Yes.
Because one of the things too right now, I'll be honest with you, this getting online training up and running is taking a huge amount of staff's time. Because redesigning sets on the back half and making sure that's going, and then reviewing the, and I failed to mention the board, we did lose Deb Williams, our curriculum manager. She's the lady who the last 7 years would review curriculum and, work with Penn State Fayette. So right now that additional duty's back on staff of trying to make sure curriculum's good. And just with the 3 individuals working on it, there's only so much we can bite off. Because down the road, if we did this, if the board wanted to do that, we'd also have to then, lack of a better term, kind of vet. Okay, this is approved training, these types of things, this, not so much, Because MOPEC has done that as well.
I just know,
They have.
exactly. I figure if it's MOPEC approved, then maybe should be constable approved. But I just
training.
Thinking about being a member of all these different work groups that we had through and showing up with these things, I know that we're really trying to find every single possibility way to save every penny that we can because we want to stay solvent. And then the last thing I want to mention is there was a lot of talk here today about the difference between what PCCD trains us for court work and for what the what an actual the constable is. It's a very very strange dichotomy, and I'm sure everybody here understands that. As an elected peace officer, there's that common law side of things, and then as as a constable who goes through certification and works for the courts, there's that side of things. And so, I personally, I'm kind of like Constable Westover. I do very, very, very little to almost zero what some people would call like peacekeeping duty. And if it is something like that, then it's got to be very specific, like a government organization or something like that. But why? I guess my question is why, if a constable goes through this training because he only wants to do work for a coal mine, fracking, something like that, why is it that organization requires that constable to be certified for court work, which you guys can't answer? I'm just kind of saying this for the record, because it has nothing to do with court work. It has to do with the peacekeeping side of the peace officer side of the office of the constable.
And
you know what I'm saying? And
this, over 25 years, I don't have hard data to prove this, but I think it's one of those things that constables were always kind of doing those things, and then when the Training Act passed, they just passed on to these, oh, hey, now I'm certified, I'm trained by a state entity. Mm-hmm. And so there's a misconception, as Sherry, and I've had those phone calls from an entity goes, and now, because of this safe school thing, I'm getting calls all the time from, I had an attorney call me, representing 2 school districts. He says, well, we're going to hire constables to be security guards. And I explained, he says, well, we looked at 235 and constables because the constables training is better because they're going every year, they get firearms training, they get use of force training, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm not going to disagree with you. I do think it's a better standard, but it's not for that. It's not for, because there's other things. To be an SRO or a school security guard, there's other things you need to learn and be knowledgeable on. And so I think there are people out there who just assume, oh, this fits our bill because he has a state-issued card. I think that's what it comes down to.
Okay. Well, because credibility.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And then there are constables who aren't going to, disabuse somebody of that notion that it covers them to do that.
Right. And let's face it, Dan, we get all these blow-off calls. I get them every week. And they're when I say blow-off calls, it's because a person will call me and say, I need a civil standby. I talked to PSP, they told me to call you. Talked to Sheriff's Office, told me to call you. I talked to local PD, they told them to call you. Because they want to blow the call off. So they say, call the constable. So I continually field those phone calls about these civil standbys. And I know a couple of years ago in our training curriculum, we talked about the fact that really the only way you should tackle that is if you have a court order from a common pleas judge with an itemized list of inventory and a date, time, location, and the name of the constable is authorized to perform that. And now you're under the Colorado law. You're under that, that court order, so you're covered if something goes bad. But anything else that we're doing out there in these civil standbys, and that's a large portion of work that some of these guys are taking on, is going out on a regular basis and doing civil standbys and charging whatever, because it's not in the fee bill. So whatever they decide to charge, that's what they charge, what the market will bear.
Sure. And actually now with the change in the PFA law, I do believe there's now a portion in there that if the victim requests, it now includes law enforcement, municipal police, I think state police, that the judge issues an escort order, lack of a better term. So you may see, and I'd be curious how that cuts into that work. Yeah.
I did 2 of those last month where I got called directly from the court.
John, John, in Allegheny County, I can tell you in Antoine, I have the same court orders out of Colorado Police Department that assigned a constable to stand by.
All the time.
And even named the constable.
Right.
And there's a service they're performing where we're not getting the $5 surcharge.
You're exactly right.
And
Now that doesn't happen a lot,
Yeah.
but I have seen those.
But it's
And if you
increasing.
multiply it across the Commonwealth, hey,
prisoner transport for a funeral.
In the city, our police officers won't even do it. They say you have to contact the constable.
Right.
I have one last question, I'll sit down. It's great news that the board has decided to, I think, to take on a BCCD about constables paying for their basic certification. I think the data proves that. With that being said, is there ever gonna be any talk in the future, about that huge number of constables that do zero work for the courts whatsoever paying a portion?
And I think, like I said, the hardest part about that was administratively, how do I know you worked for the court and Anton did, but I think we've got that resolved. But staff has to do a little more work to bring it to the board at the next meeting and go, this is how we can crack that. That's always been the hard part, is how do we prove that?
Right, I think through attrition, you're gonna see this number probably start to dwindle off completely if constables are gonna be able to train up front. But with that being said, there's still 1,000 constables, 900 constables out there.
And that would cut our training requirements in half. I mean, right now we average 50 to 55 con eds a year. Think of the savings if we drop down to 25 or 30.
yeah, and I can further answer your question. From being on the board and from being at these meetings with the contractors for years and years and years, that has been discussed ad infinitum. Am I correct?
Yes. But I think we now have a way that we can do
We're in a good spot now, I think. Are you getting into a better spot?
All right. Do you think, is there any chance on that by the next BCCD meeting that we might have an answer from some of these constables with an email, or is that something that we're going to bring up in the next board meeting?
next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I? Sure.
Yes, sir.
Have we ever thought about sending a letter to the Department of Education, letting them know that the certification that we provide is not a certification that the schools can use for security in the school?
Well, now the PCCD has that Safe School Committee. We have PDE represented. That conversation's already started about, what's, that's already.
Okay.
I think the major makes a good point though, John. I think it's beyond conversation and there should be some kind of, it should be documented.
Well, and that's echelons above me.
Just like a military
man. Just real quick, thanks for your time.
Please stand.
Say your name.
Say your name.
Okay, I'm
For the
sorry.
record.
Identify your county.
For the record.
Antoine Malloy, Allegheny County Constable Association. So I had a couple questions regarding the amount that was going to be required for constables to pay, for new constables to pay for basic training and for basic firearms. I know the numbers are significantly different than what we were tossing around before, and I was wondering if you had those numbers available for me to take back to my county. But I've been preparing Allegheny for this for a while, but I think we're tossing around something like between 8 and 15 for both before, and now it's almost double. I'd like to know.
The previous numbers that were used before did not include administrative costs.
Okay.
So that's the cost of PCCD staff and then also the administrative cost for the contractors. So that's why those costs significantly increased.
Wayne, do you have those two numbers for the 80 hour?
Yeah. It was 1123.
Yeah, they're in here. I'm good with that.
And over the years, that thing will fluctuate up and down, that number.
Okay.
It's not a set number.
And then two other questions. One about the for Con Ed, and this was specifically for myself. I've been on a waiting list for, I don't know, probably like a month or two. Do you get contacted if the class doesn't, if another class doesn't get put on, or?
Right. We have minimums, and staff can see this every day. And in fact, the system notifies staff, hey, we're 60 days out, you haven't hit the minimum for that class to run, et cetera, et cetera. So class and the contractors manage that. So, and then also too, we get down to it, and if we know a Con Ed's one of the last ones in an area, we got 2 people on a waiting list. And if the site can accommodate 2 more people, we'll try and get those people in. But again, managing that training population and having, how many people were getting into a class, we kind of let the system manage it, because if I drop out, I go in and unenroll, the next guy on the waiting list slides over. We don't get involved till we're pretty close to that class. So
I just don't want to be in danger of missing a class for the year.
Sure.
Or someone contact me and say, hey, you can't get in there, you need to quickly get into somewhere else.
And we're meeting with the contractors right after this meeting is over, and we're good. That's one of the discussion items we're gonna have.
I will tell you though, if you want to be sure you're going to get into class, there are openings in the Southwest that you could get into a class, actually be registered or enrolled in the class.
Rather than being on a waiting list.
Hanging out on the wait list. Because you're rolling the dice when you're on the wait list. You might not get in.
Okay. So that's the question. Will somebody contact me and say, you're not going to get in? You need to get into another class before.
They should.
Yeah,
before
you
that
would
class
hear from the
closes.
coordinators.
Okay. And maybe, I don't know if you can answer this, John, but as far as the new school SROs and things go, I saw that the sheriffs and mobile tech police officers were at a different level of training requirement than just the average citizen or security guard. And if you really look at it, then the constable would have to go through the training as a regular citizen or security guard. But why wouldn't, with the training that we already get, why wouldn't we be in that same category with the sheriffs and
right, and I wasn't involved in writing that. I mean, and part of that bill has already caused us a lot of problems, because they're now saying SROs, school police, and school security guards all have to go to NASRO's basic SRO course, which is only designed for sworn law enforcement. It wasn't designed for security guards. So whether that happens in the future, because PCCD is now very involved in setting those standards, etc. Down the road, I don't know. But right now, I think, because they went back, that was an amendment to include sheriffs. Because there was already probably 15, 18 counties where the sheriff, mainly rural, they don't have a municipal police. The sheriff's been providing SROs. In Erie County, they've been doing it for about 14 years, providing SROs. So.
Okay. Well, I think it's headed in a good direction with, constables having to pay for their training. Even, we need to look at the Con Ed having to do the same thing, some portion of it. And, I echo what Mr. Hobbenbach said about it.
We have a question for you.
Good question for me.
Did you get us 7 tickets for the early show?
Before we close, I'd like to thank the Major for his explanation of being able, the ability to use the same model, the same make gun, should something happen to your weapon.
You should thank me for asking the question.
I thanked you already this morning.
Yeah, you already did. Okay. Anything from our educators in the back room? No. Gino?
Good.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make that motion.
Do you have something, Dee?
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's something that I wanted to comment.
Please stand, ma'am, and
State your name.
State your name.
Dee
Come to the front of the room, please, ma'am.
Up the front of the row.
Dee Biter, Constable Training
Oh, she
Coordinator
said
at
no.
Temple University. I want to say that it has been extremely interesting this year with the 4-hour firearms training. I have found that it's either black or white. Either they love the training, oh my gosh, why didn't we do this years ago, or I hear that when I read the course evaluations, and I read every single course evaluation, it's either why didn't we do this years ago, or oh my gosh, why is there no practice, why is there no remediation, why do we, et cetera, et cetera. Why is the training manual online, why is there no classroom, this isn't really training. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but so far it has been overwhelmingly positive.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that comment. I know we're wrapping up, but in this day and age, with law enforcement is sometimes looked at from the media and the public, my hope is that one of the things I kept bringing up during all these meetings that we had for the work groups was that there'll be a certain point in time where our budget is solvent again, and that we have enough money to go back. Because I don't know any law enforcement agency in the entire country that would ever say less training is good.
Right.
Or better.
Right.
Very, very good.
I think more
Well
training.
stated. That's our goal.
Yeah, we're not, believe me, we're not delighted or tickled
Yeah.
pink that we had to take the action we took.
That's our goal. That's our goal.
I'd like to comment on the young lady's,
But
Come on, young.
are you gonna thank her for getting up and talking?
and I'm also gonna tell her, that the recommendations were not made by us. They were put together by these constable associations to cut back on hours, to do this, to do that. Okay, to save money. It wasn't us. They brought that information to us and said, hey, this is what we wanna do, this is what we should do. And we just approved it.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of them realize that.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I think, next time you get a call and
Mhm.
maybe you ought to say, hey, your organization recommended this to the board.
Most of what I see is on the written about course evaluations, and I'm not always at every firearms
Okay.
training class.
But, anybody would have to call you.
Yeah.
Tell them it was
I
the
will
recommendations of the constable associations throughout the state.
Okay, very
Brought this to
well.
the board.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make that motion again.
Do I have a second?
Correct.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Vote with your feet.
We are now adjourned. Next meeting,
November 7th,
November 7th,
right here, 9 o'clock.
shared by the donuts.
You're welcome.
And then if the contractors will just take a little break in between and then we'll be.
Jerry will be hosting